We're on. Okay, good evening. This is Peter Hallen with the show Israel. And Dr. E. Michael Jones just came back from a trip to India. And he's going to be able to tell us why he went. He was there about 6 weeks. But before we get going on that, I want what's going to be up ahead. Just received a brand new DVD, 16 PhD scientists on evolution. What they're saying on the back is, if we could award evolution's Achilles heels more than 5 doves, our best rating, we would. In other words, this is considered maybe the best DVD on evolution. And I'm waiting for people from this group to do that. And the book that's really catching the eyes of a lot of people lately is Martin Luther wrote the book On the Jews and Their Lies. Obviously, it's important. King, at age 5, his dad changed his name to Martin Luther because he thought Martin Luther was a real role model to go by. And what Martin Luther said, addressed. Martin Luther deviated from the Catholic Church pretty strong on the issue, so the issue is out there, and we're going to have to take a look at it. We talked last time. We talked about your book, Barren Metal, that you just wrote. What you're going to discuss today touches somewhat on some of the themes here, and feel free to talk about that. So, the only connection I have with India is my nephew is over in Jaipur. It's about 3 million people, and my nephew's father who was ambassador to India under George Bush. So other than that, I don't have much connection to India.
Yeah, you're not unlike most Americans. There's been very little connection with Indian history, even though we live in a state called Indiana, where Indians used to live. It's a different kind of Indian, misunderstanding. But it's a huge subcontinent and one of the most ancient cultures in the world. Goes at least 3,000 years. It's right up there with Egypt in terms of being an ancient culture. The Indus River Valley is one of the first places where people went from being hunter-gatherers to farming, and they're still doing it. You know, I was the end of my trip. I was in Goa, which is a former Portuguese colony on the west coast. Met a guy. Took me to a village, and then he took me on the back of a scooter off into the rice paddies, and we went fishing. And you look out at the rice paddies, and there are the women standing there, you know, planting the rice. And a water buffalo shows up, and you can sense that this has been going on this way for millennia. You know, this culture, and now they're being social engineered. You can imagine social engineering that got it on the Indian people right now. Don't know what's going on. Don't know what's so, and so as a result, you have unhappiness about a large segment of the population, especially the Hindu population, feeling that their culture is being taken from them, their livelihoods are being compromised, all this type of thing, this inchoate feeling that something bad.
He took a position high up with the World Bank, if I remember right. So, problematic? Right
problematic
there, I mean,
for your uncle?
Well, problematic for the social engineering. I mean, because it has a lot to do with the money system, right? Isn't that kind of part of your theme?
Well, to jump ahead, the big crisis recently in India came with the fall of the Soviet Union in 1990. India was always a traditional ally of the Soviet Union and tried to carve out after independence as independent third world bloc. The unaligned nations. This was a lot of talk about this in the 50s. This all went along, and India was a sort of socialist country, by the fact that it was an overlay over this ancient culture that was just very difficult to change. But that changed in 1990 when the Soviet Union collapsed. And suddenly it cut adrift. It didn't have its, you know...
One of its main allies.
One of its main allies, but also the main explanation of everything, which was basically socialism and Marxism. So at this point they turned to the West for guidance, and lent them money. And this proved to be, once again, the Trojan horse, bringing in all sorts of ills that are not apparent when you look at the outside of the Trojan horse. So at this point, opening up the communications industry to foreign investment, which hadn't happened before. And then as soon as the foreign investors come in, they want to have a say on what the content is, and immediately they're realized.
Is reading your book, somebody's term, a Faustian bargain, is that, are you saying that that's a type of Faustian? In other words, they're making a pact. The country's making a pact with the IMF. You loan us the money.
I don't know, why devil by associating him with the IMF?
Well, it sounds like...
Isn't that an awful thing to say about the devil?
Well, the love of money is the root of all evil, right? You're saying that when
Actually, you're absolutely right. And as a matter of fact, it goes to the heart of the matter, because the Faust legend in Germany came about with the rise of the money economy. And if you analyze the Faust legend it's really about borrowing money. You borrow this money for nothing. All you had to do was sign on the dotted line, right? And then suddenly you get all this money, and you can buy women, you can buy whatever, and you got to pay it back. And that's when the devil shows up with the contract. Here's the contract you sign. So it's like a metaphor for borrowing money and getting caught in the usury trap. And of course, that is also primarily what is happening in India right now. They're being caught in the usury trap. The last thing that I was there when Obama visited. I watched him on television. I was in Delhi 2 days before he was. And what does he do as got to India? He lends them $4 billion.
That was nice of him.
That was nice of him. I felt like in the book Barren Metal, the term comes from Merchant of Venice. And that's when Shylock is talking to Antonio, and Shylock offers I want to be your friend, I want to lend you money, he says. And Antonio says, if it's breeding barren metal, keep it for your enemies. In other words, lending money to enemies, not your friends. But nobody in India, well, that's not true. They have read the Merchant of Venice, but nobody understands the meaning of it, because they would be wary of these, I fear Americans even when they come, is what they should have said.
Is it all right to? There's China and there's India. Are they're susceptible to different temptations in this area?
They're completely different cultures. They're both ancient cultures, and they're completely, but they're involved in the same self-defeating bargain at this point. And the self-defeating bargain that I'm talking about is a cheap labor force as your. That's your comparative advantage. You've got a cheap labor force. This is totally self-defeating, both in China and in India. It'll work itself out in different ways, but defeating no matter where it happens.
But where's the immorality involved with a cheap labor force?
Well, it's theft, first of all.
Because they're not being paid.
You're stealing. Yeah, you're not being paid a just wage. Every laborer creates what you call surplus value, and all the surplus value is being stolen from the country. And you have brokers, kind of dishonest political brokers like Modi, Narendra Modi, who, he's coordinating the theft of Indian labor. And he's creating huge amounts of animosity. But in order to deflect the attention, the animosity away from the true source, he's also supporting the religious fundamentalists, the Hindu fundamentalists, who are engaging in attacks on churches, burning churches down, desecrating shrines, and also something they call Gar Wapsi, which means coming home. In other words, forced conversions of Indian Christians to Hindu. Viewing Christianity as an alien religious tradition.
Right. So in the Catholic, in the last 10 years, 20 years, the Catholics have coming home too. This is a little bit different.
This is different. All away Catholics, they're trying to get them back into the church. No, what their assumption is that every Indian is a Hindu, and if you're not a Hindu, you're some sort of traitor. And to try it on the Muslims, but the Muslims will first of all, there are a lot bigger, a lot more Muslims than there are Christians, and they will react violently.
Muslims will fight.
Yeah.
Where the Christians basically
The
turn
Christians, we're talking about 2%. 2% of over 1 billion people. There's a lot of people, but it's still only 2% of that population. And they're feeling weak and disorganized, and I just don't see them rising to the challenge at the moment. Just get some things, fundamental things straight. They got to get a clear sense of what's going on. And so when I had the chance to talk to people, I think that they felt that I understood what was going on.
But you went over, I may say it, with the priest from St. Pat's.
St. Pat's, Father Cyril Fernandez. Yeah, it's purely because of him that I got to go. He suggested I go. He organized the round from one place to another, where he has worked in the past. He's a priest of the Diocese of Jamshedpur. He created 5 schools. He did an enormous amount of work there. At the end of it, was feeling kind of burned out, all the work he had done. So the bishop suggested that he come over here for a sabbatical, and he's been here 16 years now. It was only supposed to be 1 or 2 years.
Wow.
But I guess everybody likes him over here, so he was the one who took me around. So the first place we visited was his ancestral homestead in the jungles outside of Mangalore, which is to the south. So it's warm there, and the family's is jungle fruit. Beetle leaves, arachnid fruit, all kinds of fruits that you never even knew existed. They all grow. Coconuts, it's all in the jungle there, and they all have some type of value. The food there is really kind of the best in the world in terms of its freshness. We Americans probably wouldn't perceive it that way because basically it's spread out on the road. There are no stores. But the other side of being spread out on the road is got to be fresh because,
there's no way to preserve it.
There's no way to preserve it. It's not frozen. It's not, you can't inject chemicals into it. It's just basically they picked it that day and there it is on the roadway. When you buy chicken, the chicken stares at you from a cage,
and then
you
they
point
kill it
out
right
to
there.
that one and they kill it right there. So it's really fresh. Everything is really fresh. And the people look as if they're not eating a whole lot of food. Some of them.
But then maybe they don't if they're getting...
You don't need as much.
No.
I think if you look at the average American, you think there's something wrong with the average American. Obesity, not like the epidemic, which comes from eating lots and lots of refined foods, sugar and flour. So that's the positive side, but there is this, what should I say, over the land that you look at, there's something wrong here. There's something wrong, and I think the heart of what's wrong here is labor.
Now, is this something that has been recent, or is this something you think is...
It's always been this way. You have, I kept thinking about it the whole time, and when I come back, I'm thinking about it. And you're confronted by things like the main from Ranchi to Calcutta goes through Jamshedpur, which is the major steel producing area in India. The Tata steel plant is there. And so the steel that goes out goes along this road. It's like 1.5 lanes of traffic. And so really narrow roads. And so you're constantly passing like some type of auto rickshaw that's going 12 miles an hour, heading out into there's a big truck carrying steel heading straight towards you. So you're kind of zipping in and out of traffic. And then we're in the middle of nowhere, and traffic comes to a complete stop. Now, I'm used to traffic in big cities because the cities are horrendous. But why is it stopped in the middle of the country? There's nothing here. Well, you finally edge your way up one car at a time, and there's a woman who's drying rice, using the road, one lane of the road, to dry rice.
The main roads?
The main east-west road. And half of it's taken up with this lady drying rice on it. And everybody just seems to accept it. So the government recognizes that this got to change, so they're now widening. There's this big muddy gash along the side of the road where they're going to widen it. So you look there, and
so that lady can...
So she can have 2 lanes to dry her rice on. So we come to a car, all of these women going down into they're building a bridge over the creek, going down into the creek with bowls on their heads. They go down somebody shovels 2 shovelfuls. How much can a bowl, salad bowl, you know, how much dirt can that hold? Well, whatever it is, they fill it up. The woman puts it on her head and she walks about 20 feet and dumps it someplace else. And this is the main east-west road, and this is how it's going to be constructed. So why are you doing it this way? You know, then you see a bulldozer. And you think, well, wait a minute, how can you have a woman with dirt on her head and a bulldozer in the same type of construction site? How is this possible? Well, it doesn't make any sense. But this is kind of the story of India. You know, you've got this like ancient culture with its kind of ancient ways of doing things, including a caste system. And then you've got modern technology with the English and is still arriving every day. But no coherent way of putting these things together, because there is no coherent way to put this together.
But you wouldn't think that. I mean, a lot of people from India. I mean, we meet very intelligent Indian people who some of them go to very good universities there.
Okay, this is all right. Where did you meet the doctor from India? Here in South Bend?
Well, yeah, local. I mean,
yeah.
here.
Well, why isn't he in India?
Well, they don't.
What's the answer to that question?
Well, that gives you a clue. But sometimes they're.
Why isn't he in India?
Because he probably doesn't like a lot of that.
Because he can't earn enough money. This is the other problem. When you've got this chronic low wages, as soon as somebody gets a skill that is marketable, they leave. So what you have here is a tremendous drain of intelligent, skilled workers from India because of this chronic low wages.
Yeah, that explains it, because you wouldn't think some of the Indians you meet are very astute. You wouldn't think.
Yeah, and you met
that
them here.
astuteness
you didn't
isn't
meet
being
them there. You know, like a heart surgeon. There's a heart surgeon here in town who's an Indian. Well, you know, he's making money here. You can't make this kind of money over there because the whole pay scale and the wages are too low. So this is why I'm saying self-defeating. It's self-defeating because you can't focus the labor of the country on for the good of the nation.
Is this like, I mean, in a sense, a missionary is to convert people to Christ, but also to transform the country sometimes, right? To transform kind of pagan ways.
Yeah.
Christianity is just not making headway there, right? You wouldn't see these problems as much.
Well, you got layer upon layer of issues here. Okay, so let me just go back to the Indian labor. You got the bulldozer, salad bowl of dirt on the woman's head. But there's something missing in between, like a wheelbarrow. You know, you could do 20 times the work of one woman. That one woman could do 20 times the work if she had a wheelbarrow. Because I'm sure you also these dirt into a wheelbarrow and get it back and forth a lot faster than the way she's doing it. But they never seem to have discovered the wheelbarrow. I saw bulldozers, I saw women, you know, with stuff on their heads, but no wheelbarrow. Symbolic of the whole, like, Indian culture. You know, that you had this ancient culture that just didn't change. None of the developments that took place in the West took place in India. So think of the time, when did people carry bowls on their heads? Like building in the pyramids?
Yeah, way back.
And when did people start using bulldozers? You're talking about a period of
80 years.
How many years are we talking about here? 5,000 years, maybe, give or take.
And they don't want to change.
Well, the point is that
there
are lots of things that people discovered in 5,000 years, especially that led to the ability to make a bulldozer, and all of that's missing.
But Europe was almost all Christian. I mean, during the Middle Age, all Christian. They're all Hindu. Isn't that a reflection of their faith? And
yes,
the West
it is what it is. That the Christian workforce is naturally more productive than a Hindu workforce. I mean, I don't know whether this is going to offend people, but I think that's the case. So I'm reading Pesch, and I'm reading Pesch, the Lehrbuch der Nationalökonomie, which is the theoretical basis for barren metal.
And he wrote that, what was that, 1920s? I forget.
It came out, the final version came out in the 1920s.
Okay.
Biggest book of Catholic economics. And he's talking about wages. And he comes to this guy, Lord Brassey, was an Englishman who built railroads. And he said every time his experience was the same, no matter where he built railroads. The conclusion he came to was higher wages lead to lower labor costs. That's kind of paradoxical, isn't it?
Well, the average guy, the Vanderbilts and the Carnegies and the Rockefellers, you didn't always get the impression that they believed that.
So who figured that out? Henry Ford figured that out. And that's why he raised wages, and he became extremely productive because of that. But the guy who built railroads all around the world, the higher the wage, the lower the labor cost, because you have better workers, and they get the job done better and faster, and they think the thing through. And that's, in a sense, what the Christian workforce was.
It's also enabling them to have a decent family.
That's right.
That the wife can stay home.
You just add all this stuff
family
together,
unit stronger.
and what you do is higher wages, cut down on the day, down to 8 hours, no more than 8 hours. And you have an increase in labor costs go down. Well, this is a revolutionary type of discovery, and they don't have it. As a matter of fact, not only do they not have it, they're doing the exact opposite. They're comparing out to the world and saying, they have a campaign called Make in India. Okay, why do you want to make in India? Well, because we have cheap labor here. So if you pay low wages, guess what? Your labor cost is going to be high eventually. And this is what people I've talked to here in manufacturing in this country who have had to deal with outsourcing find that it's not productive. You know, people who now spend their jobs, are skilled at what they do, can solve problems, now are supposed to delegate part of their stuff to India just to keep the guys busy. When you have a workforce like this, think of the pyramids in Egypt. One of the purposes of the pyramids is to keep those people busy, which means just walk, put it on your head, walk 10 feet, dump it out, go back, fill it up, that'll keep you busy all day, and so you're just, it's destroying the productivity of labor. It's stultifying the productivity of labor, and that's what you're saying. So to get back to this quote, there's Lord Brassey talking about building, we built them, the higher the wages, the lower the labor cost, except Hindus, he says. Hindus were the exception. Why are Hindus the exception? He didn't say.
What is the stronghold of Hinduism? Is there something in particular? I mean, other than just this Hinduism, is there anything particular about it that's really creates part of their problem? Stronghold within Hinduism?
It's an ancient religion that grew up in a part of the world that was left pretty much totally undisturbed. And they have such a huge critical mass that it is a dent on Indian culture. I mean, I prayed at the tomb of St. Francis Xavier. He showed up with the Portuguese. Goa was their colony. It's the nicest place in India. They have beaches there. There's this Portuguese culture. It's just a nice place. But even with somebody as dynamic as St. Francis Xavier, 2% of the population. It just didn't catch on. He wasn't the first. St. Thomas the Apostle went there. So it's not as if they haven't had time to expose. St. Francis was there 500 years ago, Thomas the Apostle years ago. And you just didn't seem to make a dent on this huge block of ancient culture. But so I'm there, and we do a tour of Mumbai, and they take you to the temple of Ganesh. Ganesh is the god. He's got like a chubby guy, but he's got an elephant's head. That's the idol. So we're the idol of Ganesh, and
just to see him.
Yeah, I'm not.
You're just
not
being
my
a
religion.
tourist. You're a tourist.
I'm not going to offer sacrifice to the idol of Ganesh.
But you're just.
But I'm there to see it. So you're waiting in line. There are a lot of Hindus there who are going to offer sacrifice. But you're waiting in line, and there are 2 silver rats, about 3 feet high. And the Hindus put like a little blanket on the back of the rat, and then they put a garland around the rat's neck. And then they walk up and they whisper in the rat's ear. And those are the prayers that are supposed to go. The rat, in other
Through
words,
the rat.
Yeah, the rat's supposed to. So here you say, from your mouth to God's ear, But in India, you say from your mouth to the rat's ear to God's ear. I mean, it's not unlike Christianity has angelos means messenger, so
Yeah.
it's a little bit like that. And then we finally get to the idol. And there's Ganesh, you know, and everybody give the priest coconuts and you half back. So it's kind of like a deal they cut there. And then we leave there and we go to the Nehru Science Center. And there's Yuri Gagarin, shows you the Soviet era, and there's a big mural of the, and it begins with the Big Bang, and then there's a phrase there about a couple feet in, atoms formed. Well, what do you mean atoms formed? Why this passive voice here? There's no agency here, weren't created, they formed, this is like shit happens?
Now, when you say atoms form, you're talking about molecular atoms, not atom.
No, atoms,
Yeah.
you know, like these building blocks of
Right.
the universe. Atoms formed. What does that mean? No sense. So what do you have in common here with the ancient Hindu culture and the modern scientific culture? Neither one has causality.
No, it's like a pantheism, right? Or
It's like everything just exists value and there's no causality. And so this is the problem here. It's hard to be a thinker when you live in an atmosphere like this. And I think this may be part of the problem. So I'm always visiting schools, all these big Catholic schools. It's like the 1950s. They're all wearing Catholic school uniforms.
and the girls are separate.
Yeah, for the most part. And booming. And everybody wants to go to these Catholic schools. They're much better than the government schools. So I go into an English class, and there's teacher says, all right, any questions for the American? Hindu boy stands up, and he says, can you prove the existence of God scientifically?
So he's like 16, or what would he
Yeah,
be?
it's 10th grade.
Okay.
10th grade English class. So I said, sure. And then I said, nothing comes from nothing. There is something. Therefore, there was never nothing. This would bring itself into existence because it would have to exist before it existed. That's impossible. Therefore, something else had to bring this into existence. That thing could not have a cause. If it did, then we'd go have an infinite regression. Okay? So that thing, that uncaused thing that brought this thing into existence is known as God. So there's this kind of stunned silence. You don't know whether, did he understand? But I mention this because I think there's a hunger there among these kids for something, some foundation, some intellectual foundation. They are innocent of the metaphysical tradition, as far as I can tell.
Well, people that go to the universities here that are taught evolution, they're in a somewhat similar quandary.
Sure they are. And you're absolutely right. I mean, this is basically, it's cosmic evolution. I think that's what the title was, over the cosmic evolution. Well, it doesn't make sense. There's no causality here. You can say Big Bang is the beginning, but what does that mean? It's got a beginning, but it doesn't have a cause. How can you have a beginning without a cause?
But one church and state in any fashion, and then the state has control. The state does not want to acknowledge God.
Right.
It's in their total interest.
So what you have is a replay of what happened here is going to replay there. So when up in Delhi, he gives a talk on religious tolerance, and he sounds like, you know, Mr. Tolerance, you know, we know it better, you know, you Indians could learn from us, you know. And
a little condescending.
A little condescending, especially since his friend Modi, it was really a slap in the face to his friend Modi. Every Indian politician said that. This was a real slap in the face to Modi. Because Modi got to power. These Hindu fundamentalists, they're the guys who put him in office.
So now he's talking tolerance.
It's a rebuke to Modi. Every politician said that. Okay, all right, let's remove religion from the public sphere, which is what we did over here. Well, you mean there's going to be no controller? Who's going to determine what gets done and what's right and what's wrong? Well, the answer is they had those.
The people with the money.
The Indian CEOs and the American CEOs get together for this love fest about how we're going to divide up the country and we're going to suck cheap Indian labor out. We're going to steal labor. Well, that's the hidden grammar of church and state. Remove religion from the public sphere so that the capitalists can exploit everyone. And that happened here, and it's going to happen there.
Well, you either have, the people who are going to run a country are either going to be those who have placed themselves God and are recognized as good servants, or those who have placed themselves at the service of Mammon.
That's right. Jesus said they were it's one or the other.
One of those groups are going to be controlling the country.
So if you remove religion from the public sphere, it's going to be the plan for India, as far as I can tell. But okay, it's one thing to dedicate yourself to Mammon, but these guys are not smart. They're not smart.
Even though they are smart, but in other words,
don't understand the fundamental self-defeating nature of the system that they're proposing. You can't build an economy on cheap labor. That's their selling point. That's what making India and exploit Indian labor. So, for example, Ford Motor Company will pay the job they would pay $120,000 for salary here. They pay $20,000 there.
Which is still a lot of money there.
A lot of money there, but it's only a lot of money because guess what?
Those other girls,
because
they get $2 a day.
That girl is making 100 rupees, 150 rupees, $2 a day. You're going to live like a king because you're earning $20,000 a year in an economy where she's earning $900 a year. But it doesn't work that way, okay?
Because to build a house, what's it cost?
That's right. That's exactly the point. Absolutely. The place you go, they're hugitizing life condos. Chick, so white sofa.
Western.
So you drive by these things. They're all green. The billboards are all green. Lots of water. You drive by there. It's out south of Delhi, south of Mumbai. The new high rise standing along the side of the road. You got to pay $150,000 to buy one of these condos. The absolute bottom entry-level condo on the outskirts of Mumbai.
Here, if you're
good deal, is it?
You'd have to borrow.
You have to borrow, and guess what? They're willing to lend you money. And not only that, so I'm in Calcutta, absolutely, and I'm looking at this billboard. 30-year loan, 30-year mortgage for 10%, and for your car. Good deal, your car.
10% is a lot.
10% is a lot of money. So what you're seeing here is usury. The two options, this is what I described in the book, they are when it comes to forming your economic system. Either you go with usury or you go with promoting labor. And what they're going for, usury and the ruthless exploitation of Indian labor.
Indians are not that aware of the danger of usury.
No, I don't see that they're aware at all. Even the people I talk to, people are dissatisfied, but it's just that they're like lambs being led.
I mean, that's one thing that could be restated, is that the church, for the longest time, strictly made usury, outlawed it in any fashion at all. And they felt it was either evil in itself, in a sense, but potentially really evil if it was
ruinous for any society that implemented it.
That was the standard teaching of the church.
Everyone, and it wasn't just the church, everyone before that, the Greeks and the Hebrews both understood that it was ruinous.
But then, at the time of the Reformation, people changed their mind on it.
Well, your friend Martin Luther did not change his mind on that. He was a traditionalist. Over the money, gold, bleeding out of Germany, ending up in Rome, largely because of the indulgence.
Yeah,
operation.
definitely. If you just pick this up, he's always talking about the Jews and then usury.
Yeah, there's no question about it. But the change did come with Calvin. And Calvin was a banker. We lived in Geneva. Well, it's still a banking center. And so Protestantism always baptizes the status quo. There's not an example you can find where it doesn't do that, where it doesn't baptize the status quo. And by the time it got to England, and by the time you come to the Glorious Revolution, the end of the 17th century, Presbyterianism is basically capitalism. It's a way of spreading capitalism in the English language and the system of laws, Lockean laws, this whole Whig construct. It just became unbridled capitalism.
Well, the potential of it becoming capitalism, because if you don't hold to the teachings of Christ on Well, the monasteries had the vows, a vow of poverty.
Monasteries built up enormous amounts of wealth over 900 years in England, and it got to the point where the nobility couldn't resist it anymore, and they burst out into this orgy of looting. The justification, because everybody knew it was theft, everybody knew you're looting and plundering something that doesn't belong to you, so they came up with a theological justification for it. It was known as the Reformation. It was a looting operation. That's all it was. Luther played a role, in a complex situation, but basically he handed the loot over to the princes and he got the state church. That was the deal that every Protestant reformer cut. Whether it's Luther, you name it, they did the same deal.
But for sure, by attacking the monasteries, they attacked the theology that was inherent in them. And that theology was a renunciation of avarice.
Yeah, and what's the paradox here? You renounce that and you become wealthy. They became wealthy.
He that would save his life will lose it. He that would lose his life will save it.
Not the individual monks collectively became very wealthy. The monasteries were a great store of labor.
Whereas you could say America, where everybody going so headlong after wealth in a kiddie fashion, now we're $18 trillion in debt. I mean, is there a connection?
Fast, it seems like irresistible. If you lose your moral bearings, how can you resist usury? How can you resist the idea of the temptation to borrow money? It just doesn't.
Well, you probably lost
happen.
your moral bearings partly due to the love of money to begin with.
Well, what's happening in India is they're orchestrating the sexualization of the culture, a way of softening the people up, distracting them from what's really going on. And so, as I said, when the IMF said you have to open up the communication industry, all the sexual imagery flooded in through satellite TV.
Because initially, I think you were on the show, the last time you were talking about going to India, and that was addressing the rape
crisis. So the rape crisis is a manifestation of the sexualization of the culture. Basically, it doesn't work on women. It works on men, but it doesn't. Men are uprooted. They have to come to big cities like Mumbai and Calcutta to get work. They're living in a totally slum type of environment. They see women for the first time wearing pants. They find this incredibly, it doesn't do anything to us, but we're not them,
No, but
they're used to traditional dress of the sari.
Well, the example was I read a book after the Civil War. I've mentioned this before on the show, and it's about the women in the South. First chapter was the northern women are coming into Richmond with Lincoln. And the women in the South are hiding behind the shutters, and they're wanting to see what how the northern, they want to see this fashion. They've been out of it. And they were shocked to notice that the women in the North were now showing their ankle. Well, in other words, the women knew, can the men handle it? I mean, that's kind of what they were thinking.
Well, they can't. They can't. And so these guys, they're dislocated, they get drunk, and then they just start raping women. And so that's the epidemic, and so everybody's trying to spin it. And the main way feminism. Feminism is saying women have a right to go out, half naked any time of the day or night, and nobody should say anything about it. Well, that's just not realistic. It's not realistic.
It's a blame it on. If I remember reading something, they blame it on patriarchy, that the men have too much of power.
Yeah.
And they went.
This
you took
is
the power
preposterous. The people you're talking about are totally powerless. They're day laborers. 19-year-old day laborers, uprooted from their traditional village and now in some big city and totally adrift. Sexualized, watching pornography, getting drunk, and then they act out what they
Well, it's
say.
like in Williston, North Dakota, where people oil. I had to go up there, and they don't even, like the company I had to deliver a vehicle up there, they wouldn't even allow the girls that were working for them to go to Walmart after dark, because these are guys, and here's their chance. I mean, they're just like...
Yeah, so why should it be any different in India?
No, I mean, that's just how guys are, a bunch of guys, when they uproot from
So that's the causing the crisis, and then there are all these political operatives. Well, it's Christianity, because it's an alien tradition, and they're angering the gods. It's just what St. Augustine had to deal with the fall of Rome. It's the same type of thing that's happening here. So it's not going to work. I just don't see it working. over the long haul, you're going to have all of these conflicts. You're heading toward religious war there because the people who are responsible for the destruction of the culture are manipulating everyone. The real cause. You know, the whole low wage thing is not going to work.
So is the love of money a key part of what's going on?
I think it's what's driving what's going on over there. That's the whole point. The whole purpose of social engineering, a workforce here to make it docile so that they will be exploited and won't even know they're exploited because they're being distracted by television and Bollywood movies and pornography and whatever else.
But the love of money is blind. They really knew that the higher wages actually creates a better situation for them, but they're blinded by it, and they're holding on to the money.
Well, this notion that higher wages lead to lower labor costs, that the people at the top need to know, you know, but in general, people are too stupid. Your boss, why is your boss stupid? Why is everybody's boss stupid? Why is Dilbert as a cartoon? Why is everybody's boss stupid? Well, because the culture is stultifying.
But you're saying the culture in India is partly stupid because, I suppose, Hinduism, or they don't know, ask themselves what's the cause. They don't have a God that's no.
They don't have a sense of causality. The symbol of
so you can't ask the right questions.
The symbol, you have to know. Science is understanding causes. That's all it is. You can't. The symbol of Hindu cosmology is the Earth. It's like half a sphere. That's resting on the back of an elephant. And the elephant is then standing on the turtle. And then the astute observer says at this point, well,
what's the turtle standing on?
What's the turtle standing on? And then this is the punchline of the joke. It's turtles all the way down. That's the answer to the turtles all the way down is another word for there's no causality here.
They don't, and so they give up. So they give up even asking.
It's no different than the Darwinian universe. You know, you can say the Big Bang, but how do you know the Big Bang? That's the beginning, but is it the cause? And if it's not the cause, how do you know it's the beginning? Because maybe there was a big contraction before there was the Big Bang. Maybe it's an infinite series of big bangs and big contractions. There's a bang that says, that contradicts that. Well, that's not an explanation. Because unless you deal with causality, you're not dealing with science.
That's what these 16 scientists, when you listen to their testimonies, they go, the question, they're explaining how they got caught in it for so long, until they actually were asking the right questions. What is the cause? Because they deflect.
Well, that's what, like the traditional Hindu cosmology, both have in common. I mean, Darwinism is, let's face it, it's turtles all the way down. It's just a sophisticated version of turtles all the way down. And that's why your boss is stupid. Because you go to Notre Dame and you learn that there's turtles all the way down. If you're learning evolution, that's what you're learning.
Right, so it's a type of...
It's not like God created the heavens and the earth. That's sophisticated. That's causality. That's causing something.
Yeah, then you ask the next question, how did he do it? Well, then you open up the scriptures and you get some clue how he did it.
Yeah, and
which competes with Darwin's.
But the major point of Genesis, which we are reading this, is that you're talking about causality. God created heaven and the earth. It's a full grammatical sentence, as opposed to atoms formed. That doesn't make any sense.
No, when I grew up, every morning, every night, I always would pray, and part of my prayers was the Apostles' Creed. I mean, it's kind of what held me together. I believe in God, the creator of heaven and earth. You can't go forward without that.
You can't, so to get to the other side, you can't have it with Darwinism, and you can't have it in a religion that has 30,000 gods.
So they can't really go forward. They've just kind of like...
I think that this is what he was talking about when he said it didn't work with Hindus. I think that Pesh talks about the virtues of a Christian workforce, of people who are used to understanding causality and better workers because they can figure things out, as opposed to a group of people that, where it's turtles all the way down.
Well, how can you be the head of the home if you don't have an answer to like what we're talking about?
How can you do anything if you don't have an answer? What you're seeing is kind of like a gamble that we're going to create we're going to create people who are deliberately create stupid people, because and stuff like that through social engineering. We're going to keep them docile and stupid so that they will just work and do nothing else, work and consume and not question the arrangement. Well, I don't think the human spirit will put to be manipulated that way. And I think the violence you're seeing in India, both the rape and the religious fundamentalism, is a sign it's not going to work. It's not going to work. Even like Samuel, the Hindu boy, he wants a scientific proof for the existence of God.
Boy that asked the question.
Yeah, he asked the question because he's a human being, and human beings, the human mind will not rest until it finds a cause.
You might be able to answer the question.
Yeah, and he was right. I did answer the question. You know, and so that's the only option, and that's why I said the Catholic Church has to break out of its coma, out of its Vatican-inspired coma, and start preaching the gospel. I mean, at least preaching Logos. Let's say we have to preach Logos, because that's what a school does.
Well, part of it is, and that's why I think Notre Dame needs to really look at evolution and try to work it through better. Saying it nice, because if causality, they have no way of knowing what caused things. The part of the gospel is that they created it.
Look, the same thing. You have the same thing at Notre Dame that you have in India. If you stultify the human mind, you deliberately stultify the human mind with ideologies like, there's going to be a violent reaction.
Well,
the violence at Notre Dame is drinking and pornography. It's self-inflicted. You're kind of like it's like a suicidal violence, but it's the same thing that's going on in India. Human mind, in your rush to create social engineering, you're going to create violence.
I mean, I mentioned it before, but the Notre Dame, the Catholic of the Year, the Latari Medal, Notre Dame gave it to, and if he's from Brown, a biologist, but the websites oftentimes refer to him as a militant evolutionist.
Yeah,
it's
well,
like,
you can't worship God and Mammon. And let's put it this way, there are even greater similarities, because there's rape going on at Notre Dame and St. Mary's all the time, isn't there? Girl committed suicide because of being raped. It's always swept under the rug here, but I'm saying it's the same thing. You stultify the mind of young people, they're going to via alcohol and something to some act of violence, usually sexual violence. So it's no different. It's no different in the West as it is in the East. We have this patrimony that could make it different, but Notre Dame is ashamed of the gospel. You know that, I know that. They will preach the gospel as far as it's consistent with the gospel of success and money and mammon, but no farther.
they may have tokens times where they really say things right, but I'm saying the day-to-day.
Well, even the whole social justice thing has kind of died. I mean, it was big 30 years ago. I don't hear anything about social justice. I don't hear no anti-war movement, nothing. It's dead. It's totally intellectually dead over there, and it's women. All they talk about is money. Johnny Jenkins got his contract renewed because of all the money he raised. That's all they can talk about now.
Well, the sign, for me, the sign that things would be getting better, if I see more of the students in their free time actually, sound intellectual thought. I mean, taking an interest in subjects like this. It's just that somehow they're being diverted and they can't even take an interest.
They don't understand it, and when you don't understand, the net result is always going to be some type of violence, whether it's India or whether it's Notre Dame. It's the same thing.
But in the 60s, there were strong movements at most universities, even at Notre Dame, where there was a pursuit to know intellectual
our
pursuit.
generation reacted against social engineering. The whole parents' generation had just been totally engineered by the post-World War II, the army, the suburbs, the highway, the television. It was all control. And we rebelled against it. And then, didn't work out. Got worse,
Yeah, it didn't. I mean, my sister's at St. Mary's. I'd come to visit, and, it was on Friday. I mean, she'd be with all these guys. They'd go to Ingrid Bergman. They'd show movies at the basement halls, and then they'd sit afterwards, discuss, what was the meaning of that.
Well, that was good. That was
all good.
But it was all co-opted and corrupted by sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Definitely was.
And who was in charge in the rock and roll? I mean, you know, that's some question.
That's a good question.
That's a good question. We have another program. We'll have to deal with that in another program. But that's what we're talking about here.
So do you think you were able to help anybody?
So, I mean, we'll see. I wrote the report. Let's see how it plays.
Do they want you to come back?
Oh, everybody said I should come back, but they haven't read my report yet. I'll take it more seriously after they read the article.
In Britain, they wrote the report on the Gaza, like one Galloway or somebody
Yeah,
wrote
yeah.
the report, and it was not what they wanted to hear,
No,
right?
they didn't want it to hear.
So there is a danger that they could be offended by what you write.
There's always the danger. I hope that isn't the case, but I'm just trying to be as truthful as possible because I feel I know what's happening because it happened here. I'm like the man from the future. It happened 50 years ago and it's happening there. It's all the same stuff, nothing different, nothing new, all the same forms of social engineering, not a variation on what happened here in America. It's all the same thing.
Partly because the IMF has come in and you got the same.
Sure.
Well, what are you working on next? We got 2 more minutes. Is there anything you're
Well, I'm going to get
in?
to India. I'm going to do a book on India.
Really?
Yeah.
Whoa.
And I worked with a publisher. He's interested over there. But again, you're interested theoretically, but let's see if you're interested when you read the actual manuscript. That's the big question. But I think it's going to work out. I think that you get the sense that you're here for a reason. Can help them. The experience of American Catholics and the failures could be a warning and a lesson for these people.
But the real issue is preaching the gospel, and there is a danger. I mean, the apostles preached it, and they all died except John.
Yep.
People are offended. Jesus says, you know, they hate me because I testify about them that their works are evil. And if you don't mention the evil, if you don't warn the wicked, first of all, their blood's on you. I mean, the hard part of the gospel is you have to say that is wrong. It's wicked, and if you don't repent, God's got.
That's what we're talking about. So we'll see. We'll see how it turns out.
Okay. Well, that's the end of the show, Israel. And you could say, well, how does this fit in with the theme of Israel? Well, we're dealing with Israel after the flesh, which is over there in the middle too. And you could argue that they're the money people of the world. And then there's the true Israel. And Jesus said, blessed are the poor, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the poor in spirit. So you have the service of Mammon and the service of God. And of course, we're urging people to follow Christ in serving God. So thank you, and hopefully we'll have a good show next time.